Hey guys, and welcome back to my video. Today I'm going to be playing with two palettes. This is the Melt Amor y Mariposas palette, and then this is the BH Cosmetics Pistachio palette. I had a subscriber request that I do something specific with the Melt palette, and I'll explain that to you when we start the tutorial. And in today's video, I want to talk about a video that I made back in February talking about brands that I wanted to try in 2022. So I'm going to link that down below in the description box, and I'm going to go over that entire list while I put on this eyeshadow look, talking about brands that I wanted to try and whether or not I actually did. If you're new here, hello, my name is Rachel and I am a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. I really enjoy playing with lots of colorful things, but colorful eyeshadow is one of the ways that I artistically express myself, and I upload multiple videos every week. It's all eyeshadow related content, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, don't forget to subscribe before you go so that you don't miss anything new. Now let's get going. Alright, so technically my subscriber requested that I do a video using only the shades where the butterflies had landed. This one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Now technically, this shade and this shade don't have the butterfly having landed, they're just decorating the corners around the pans. I'm going to use a little creative license here, and I think it's going to be mainly these three colors. I may or may not use these two depending on how I feel the look is turning out. And I am also allowing myself to dip into the Pistachio palette from BH Cosmetics because I might want to use one of these lighter green shades to make the look more me, you know? Like, it's great to have a challenge, but at the end of the day, I have to wear this and I want to like it. And I don't want to create a look or make a video that I'm not very happy with. So I'm gonna take my subscribers' request and then maybe tweak it a little bit depending on how I feel it's going, but overall it's gonna be their request. Anyway, I am going to prime my eyes using the Glam Light Icing Primer, and then we're gonna start talking about brands that I wanted to try in 2022, and if I did. It's been a little while since I used this Melt palette, so I'm not quite sure how the formula works, if I should start with the darkest and build from there or start with the lighter. I think I'm going to go in with my standard technique as of late and see how it works. I'm taking a dense blending brush going into the shade Guamujil. And I'm not going to talk very much about the makeup in this video because I want to talk about the brands. Funnily enough, and this was not planned, the video that I have carded below for you guys where I'm talking about the brands that I want to try, the first brand that I started with was Melt. And I had done that video's eye look using this palette. And I started the video with that brand because I knew that I had that palette as like first of the year sort of thing. So it's really funny that I'm doing this video using the Melt palette because Melt was one of the brands I wanted to try in 2022, and clearly I did. I got this palette on Poshmark for I think $20 or $25. It was a good price considering the price of the palette itself. I was happy with the price that I paid, and I was so excited when it arrived because I really wasn't expecting to be able to have such a high quality palette, such an expensive palette in my collection. And I thought the color story is just really lovely. I haven't used it in a while, honestly, because now I have so many other beautiful palettes in my collection too. But I do think that the color story is beautiful. I don't have any complaints about the Melt quality that I've tried since they released this one. People have been saying that the quality's not either not up to par, or the color stories are just not very exciting. A lot of reviewers in general haven't been that stoked by Melt's more recent releases, since this palette especially. So that's very interesting to me, but I personally can't comment on it because this is the only one I've experienced. The shimmers in here are very pretty. I'm excited to play with this gold shimmer. In the Pistachio palette, I'm going to take the shade Nutty, and I'm going to use this on a small blending brush and just hit the edges here of the Melt shade because I want to lighten it up a little bit. The next brand that I mentioned wanting to try in 2022 is Juvia's Place. I haven't bought anything by Juvia's Place, but I had some subscribers really generously send me some boxes of palettes and other, mainly palettes or eyeshadow things, you know. I received the Wahala 2 palette, the Warrior palette, and the Festival palette. I think that's it. The Warrior palette is this lovely 9-pan neutral palette, some really pretty brown tones. If I remember correctly, it has 3 mattes and 6 shimmers, and everything performed really well. It's not the most exciting palette I've tried, but I'm not much of a neutral lover. The Festival palette I thought was really fun, and I've dipped into that one multiple times because I think the color story is quite interesting. It's got kind of a sunset sort of vibe going, but then randomly there's a shimmery black and a bright blue shimmer, and also, is it a hot pink? This is all off the top of my head. But I have had a lot of fun playing with that palette. I'm taking this color as well and putting it on the lower lash line. And then the Wahala 2 palette, I did an entire week of series using the Wahala 2 where I uploaded a whole week of videos. I can card that above for you if you're interested in seeing that playlist. And I got some really lovely looks. It's a nice palette. Another brand that I wanted to try in 2022 was Anastasia Beverly Hills. I was very seriously debating grabbing one or two of their Norvina palettes, and I can't remember which ones at this point. I went back and forth and I evaluated the color stories against what I had in my collection, and I ended up not buying any of them. And I'm glad that I didn't buy them because I think the color stories were really pretty, but I also was learning about myself at that time that I'm not a huge fan of very large palettes. I personally have discovered that I like palettes that are about 9 to 20 pans. That's about my happy spot. Anything bigger than 20 and I start to feel a little overwhelmed and I'm not sure where to start. There are too many options, and I also feel like we could have pared this down, edit yourself a little bit. So I have very few large palettes in my collection, and I'm glad I didn't buy those Norvina palettes because they were just too big. I know they've released some things since those big Norvina palettes, which have been much smaller palettes, and none of those color stories have interested me either. So I think that one's kind of off the table as far as me really wanting to try the brand, but that's okay. I had also mentioned trying Blend Bunny in 2022. I believe when I made the video, they had just launched their Dollhouse palette, and the Dollhouse palette held absolutely no interest for me because it was just too neutral. And I know that that is kind of a favorite among a lot of people, even color lovers, because it's a really good mix of neutral and deep tones with a little bit of color in there, some colorful leaning sorts of neutrals, It hasn't excited me at all, although I absolutely keep Blend Bunny in mind when I think about a brand that does offer a good selection in a lot of different colors, and they're very, very, very well reviewed. And I know that neutral palettes are not the only thing they do. They do them well, and they have a couple different palettes on their site. They've looked good, but not good enough to make me really want to spend the money. Then there's Natasha Denona, and Natasha Denona is another brand that really caught my eye at the beginning of end of 2021 into 2022. I was looking at them, thinking about grabbing some stuff from them. I was very interested in the Love palette, and I went back and forth comparing it to the Retro, thinking, well, what do I have in my collection now? What would I actually use and wear? What colors do I like the best? They were all well reviewed. Natasha Denona as a brand for eyeshadow is very well reviewed by people whose opinions I respect on the topic. And so I almost grabbed the Love palette multiple times. I never ended up doing it because I thought that I probably wouldn't use those colors very much. I've just discovered about myself that I don't really love the more pink tones. I do like pink, but I don't often put it in my eye looks, or I'll pair it with something else. So a palette that leans very heavily pink doesn't tend to grab my attention. And when I've owned palettes that were a little bit more pink leaning, even pink leaning purples, I don't find that I use them that much. So I didn't end up buying the Love palette for that reason. And then other brands throughout the year just caught my eye, and I never ended up trying Natasha Denona. Now it's time for this gold shimmer. I'm going to take a flat brush and dip into the shade Tequila. I have used this shade a lot, honestly. This is one of the most used shades in this palette for me. It's really pretty. I'm going to spray it after it's loaded onto my brush. Now I'm going to take this shade and lay it on my whole lid space, starting at the inner corner and going all the way out to meet those mattes. This is honestly not the most unique way to use the colors I have today, but I was just feeling it, and I didn't want to do anything crazy wild. I wanted to stick more to the green gold side of things. Kaleidos is another brand that I really was looking at, and this I would say is fair to say throughout 2022. I was keeping an eye on Kaleidos. They had launched the Futurism palettes and the Club Nebula and the Flower Punk last year. Flower Punk I ended up talking myself out of, but I was close. I wasn't as excited by their color stories this year. I thought Flower Punk was one of their most interesting and exciting recent releases, and after that they had some quads that were like the blue and purple quads. What was that called? Oh, Night of Creation was one of their launches this year. A couple other things, and nothing really caught my eye. I can't remember anything really standing out as having captured my attention. And so I do really want to try the brand, but only after I see a palette that's exciting to me. I definitely want to grab their Escape Pod palette. That's been one that I've consistently had my eye on. And that one's not even from last year. I think that was possibly the year before, but it just hasn't happened yet. So I have my eye on Kaleidos as well. It just didn't happen in 2022. I just realized that I never took this Chowdo shade, the deepest purple in the palette. So, whoops, I'm going to take a small blending brush, go into Chowdo really lightly. I intended to use this to deepen the green, And because I used a lighter green to blend out that darker green, I had the contrast that I usually get. But I forgot about Chado. So here is Chado on my outer corner only. I knew this was going to bring a different shade to the look, and I completely forgot about it. So, sorry. There were two more brands on my list to talk about. One is Sigma. I wanted to try Sigma. I think when I made that video before, they had recently launched the Cinderella palette, and I definitely had my eye on that palette for a while. And I thought the Cinderella palette was a very nice and adult, mature take on the Disney Princess collaborations, which we see everywhere and are all kind of tired at this point. Like, can we not? Can we just be done? However, Sigma did that very well. Sigma took the idea of the Disney princess and grew her up into a woman. Not a teenager, not a little kid, a woman. And instead of baby pinks and baby blues and pastel purples, we had more mature tones that were just kind of flattering on a lot of skin tones. And I thought the Cinderella palette was pretty, but not wow pretty. Like, I almost got it, but I wasn't quite sold. Then they launched the Alice in Wonderland collaboration. And that one I did end up purchasing and have used. And the Alice in Wonderland palette was Cinderella with a little bit more color, a little more whimsy, not the purples, but they instead added more greens and blues. And I thought that one was done very well. And I have enjoyed playing with it. Now, it's a totally different formula than most of what I'm used to, but overall I liked the palette, and because of using the Alice palette, I have still been on the fence considering grabbing Cinderella at some point because they would be really good companions together. And I do like the formula. I'm not in love with the formula, and that's what holds me back. But I wanted to try Sigma in 2022, and I did. Okay, so that purple has made this look a lot more grungy and murky than it was before, and mixing it with the green brought in sort of a brown element. So I've decided to take this shade Abrazos, and I don't think I've ever used this shade. I'm looking at it, I don't see any marks in the pan at all, which is why I'm grabbing this one and not the Perla shade, because I have used Perla a good amount. But I'm going to take it on a very small pencil brush because I've learned with my own level of skill that sometimes when I bring a totally different color onto the lower lash line, even if it's a mid-tone shade, I don't always like the way that it makes my face kind of close in a little bit. So I'm being very careful about my application with this shade because I know that if I bring it too far in, it's going to close off my look and I will not like it anymore. So I'm going to take a small pencil brush and dip into the shade Abrazos, and I'm going to start it in the outer corner, even though I have green there already because this purple really changed the way the look was going. I'm going to start the Abrazos here in the outer corner. And when it meets up with these now browny sorts of tones, I think it'll blend in pretty well. Putting this on the lower lash line in the outer third to the outer half. It's definitely not quite half. And there is one more brand to talk about, but I think I'm going to move on to the next step first because this step is such a short one. I'm now taking a smaller pencil brush or a blending brush. It's not super small. It's not as small as the one that I just used. Dipping into Tequila, and I'm going to place that on the inner corner and come all the way to meet that Abrazos shade. So here's Tequila. The last brand I want to talk about is Ace Beauté. At the beginning of 2022, I had not tried Ace Beauté at all. And there were several palettes that had caught my eye, such as Oceanic, Flare, and I ended up at some point during the year buying both of those palettes in the old formula. And Ace Beauté had recently relaunched in their new formula, but I really like those palettes. In fact, Flare has been a long-standing favorite in my collection ever since I tried it. I think the color story of Flare is just so special and interesting, different, unique. Enter adjective here. I really like the color story of Flare. Oceanic as well is a beautiful color story. I have since tried a couple other palettes from Ace Beauté. I've tried their Paradise Fallen palette in the new formula, and the Violet Sage palette, which was supposed to be in their new formula, and I haven't really liked either of those. I'm not totally turned off the brand. I may get the Paletopoly palette at some point because I like the variety that that one offers, and I've heard that the formula is fantastic. So I'm giving them another chance. I guess it's a second chance at me trying their new formula, hoping that I'll have a better reaction to it than I have with Paradise Fallen and Violet Sage. I don't know, we'll see. But Ace Beauté was a brand I wanted to try in 2022, and I definitely did. So here is how the look is going to finish up. I'm going to use two colors in my waterline. I'll put black in the outer corner, and then on my inner corner, I'm going to use this shade from ColourPop, which is called Extra Frosting. It's sort of a buttery color. And I'm going to go off camera and finish everything up, and then I'll be back to close out this video. Alright guys, here is how the look turned out at the end. I did some black liner on the top lashes, but I didn't wing it out, partially because I forgot. And then when I thought about it, I was like, no, that's okay. On my cheeks, I'm wearing a little bit of this ColourPop blush. It's the Super Shock Cheek in the shade No Vacancy. And then I have a highlighter from the BH Tulum palette. I used this one, and then I realized it was a mistake. It's just too gold for my skin, so I kind of buffed it in with concealer, and then I used this one instead. Anyway, these are the only warm toned highlighters I have. So on my lips, I've got the NYX Butter Gloss in the shade Cinnamon Roll, and that's it for my face. Everything is linked down below in the description box. And I think the look is really pretty. I'm actually quite enjoying that little bit of a rusty reddish shade on the outer lower corner, but I do want to emphasize that the whole concept of where I've placed it and how far I bring it in is extremely important for my own personal tastes and preferences, the way that I want my eye looks to finish. I have to be very careful about bringing a medium or darker tone further down my lower lash line. So it's just something for you guys to pay attention to when you do a look and how you feel about it at the end. What parts of it make you excited and go, oh, that looks so nice? And then what parts of it make you go, you know, pay attention to those feelings because you can learn from that. I have learned and am learning about how far I want to bring a color on my lower lash line. If it's not a bright or light toned color, I feel like it kind of closes off my face. And that's something that I personally have noticed and feel about my own eye shape and everything. So pay attention to those feelings because they can be very instructive to you. Anyway, that's my video as far as brands that I wanted to try in 2022 and whether or not I did. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you have been enjoying all of my content this year. Like and subscribe please before you leave if you don't want to miss anything new, and I'll see you guys again really soon. Bye!